Hi all, I have another amazing game to show you today, and this time it's Fabiano Caruana who was leading the tournament up until round 8. So this is a round 8 game. He was leading the tournament and he was playing against Dmitry Jakovenko. So let's see this game. I think there's an interesting theme to it to watch out for during the game, which is how doubling rooks is a bit like the bishop pair. If you consider that in chess, we have a pair of bishops, we have a pair of rooks, and it's really what we do with them as a team, when they coordinate. And we know that often keeping the bishop pair is a very good attacking weapon because they complement each other. They're looking out for each other, looking after both colours, both colour complexes. But the rooks can also coordinate. When they're in a battery, when you double rooks either on the 7th rank or on a file, they combine together to blast through things. And let's have a look at this game from this perspective of doubling rooks. It's a very interesting perspective from the point of view of the dynamic views of chess. So Caruana is a very positional player. So let's see what happened in this game. E5, knight f3, knight c6. So far, very solid choice from black. This is the Berlin defense. d3. This is one of the quieter, less theoretically trodden options. Instead of castling, d3 is a bit quieter. But bishop c5, it looks as though black's bishop is quite active here. And usually c3 is played here, knight bd2, one of the rarer moves. Black usually plays d6, here a little bit of a deviation castles. And we're in quite a rare position now. Often here, about 20 games now with c3, but bishop takes c6, about 5 games, and we're in an interesting position. But I think this has been popularized, this approach, by Magnus Carlsen, simply doubling the pawns and playing very simply, avoiding opening theory. It's the type of thing you'd expect to see from Magnus Carlsen. There's a little bit of pressure on e5, of course, here, and in fact, well, it's too dangerous to take on e5 here because queen d4, classic queen d4, and that's trouble for white. That's just big trouble for white. There's nothing to defend f2. So here we see more pressure being put on e5, knight d7, and again it's trouble to take that. Again, there's this queen d4 tactic. If knight takes here, takes queen d4, and you might think, well, knight g4 here, is that clever? Because bishop takes, queen takes, we're not getting mated, but this is just an appalling position for white here. So again, the e5 pawn is immune, just to spell that out. So bishop e3 was played, bishop d6, holding on more solidly now to e5. White castles, rook e8, knight fd2, knight f8. So this is quite a common idea, sometimes to get the knight to g6 to strengthen the grip on the dark squares. Queen h5, very interesting move, exploiting the fact the knight isn't on f6, trying to provoke some weaknesses perhaps. Like to kick the queen would weaken the dark squares, but black doesn't want to do that. He played bishop e6, and now we see h3 being played, knight g6, and it looks as though knight f4 is quite interesting here as a potential threat. This is parried in advance with g3, and of course the queen shows an advantage here. It's holding on to h3, which facilitates king g2, so white's able to get this structure where he can play king g2, then maybe h4 and rook h1, as though he's gaining some sort of aggressive attacking position. Black plays queen d7, questioning h3, that's protected, and now a very dynamic move, dynamic aggressive, but it has a downside, this f5. Not just if f5 was played, the downside is not immediately obvious here in terms of this diagonal. For sure, white hasn't got the light square bishop, but often if white's just taking it, that e4 square is often strategically useful. But there's an upside from black from a dynamic perspective, and this is the theme I mentioned. I wanted to mention really at the start of the video, that we think of the bishop pair, but in the same way the two rooks can often help each other by forming a battery, and a move like f5 is facilitating later rook lifts. If you facilitate rook lifts, you facilitate doubling the rooks, and they can be more dangerous then when they're doubled. it depends if white can soak up the dynamic pressure and say use the e4 square and control the center, that this strategy is really tested. White did take on f5, vacating that potentially important strategic square, that e4 square. Bishop takes f5, and now white jumps straight into it. There's of course no d5 here. Black's pawns here are dented, they're doubled. So it seems at the moment a very pleasant positional situation which someone like Caruana would relish, trying to destroy the opponent's counterplay. Black seems more like a dynamic aggressive player from this game so far. He's not minding the dynamic pawn structure of the double pawns, and he wants to get his pieces active. I'm sure he'd like to have the bishop pair, but also combine rooks to double the rooks, and he does start to do that with rook f8. You see this semi-open file, the start of it being used, rook a e1, and white's rooks by contrast are not going to be doubling anywhere anytime soon. Rook a e8, bishop d2, and now we see knight e7. This facilitates things like bishop g6 to kick that queen away, and maybe the knight swinging to d4 maybe. We see knight e3, so controlling that f5 square a bit more. The bishop does go to g6. The queen offers a trade. Black rejects that, so I think black already senses he doesn't want to simplify here. He wants to try and maximize the dynamic potential of his pieces. At the moment, this bishop in particular is a bit miserable. Knight g5. So here there's a concrete threat. Knight e6, forking queen and rook. This is parried, but at the same time this might be a useful rook lift at rook f6. Look at black's rooks, how they're evolving in this game. And here after h4 though, it seems, well, maybe white has a point. He's going to get to play maybe in an attacking style if left unchallenged. Black now plays an energetic knight d5 in this position, and here things are getting very interesting indeed. After knight d5, what is going on? Already there's an indication that maybe doubling rooks could be coming on the horizon on f2, maybe first kicking the knight. So the rook's doubling is an important dynamic principle. We see queen c4, and a really amazing move now from a tactical perspective. Black gets out of the pin and sets up a position which he's undoubling his pawns and creating quite a lot of dynamic potential for his pieces with this pawn sack. He's sacking a pawn here on d5. It's taking, and he can take on d5. So what's the point? Let's see. Knight takes, c takes, queen takes, and can you see the point, the liberating point here that Jakovenko makes, which means his pieces are quite aggressive now, and in fact he's inflicting some structural damage on white's previously secure position in the center, especially the control on e4 is challenged by this next move. Can you guess what black plays here and why? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, e4, an incredible move, powerful, very powerful, liberating the bishop. And you might wonder, what is this about? Surely there's no little cheapo here like winning the queen. Well, actually the cheapo can be constructed. E takes, black could consider taking out e4 here. I think rook takes e4, for example, would threaten rook takes h4 with that pin there. And also, if white takes, then bishop takes g3, winning the queen here. For example, like this, winning the queen there. So it's a bit of a liberating tactical idea, this e4. Is white losing control in this position? Has Caruana taken basically a kind of poisoned pawn in the center? But at the same time, note he's undoubled black's pawns, so it wasn't such a big loss. They were double pawns anyway. And he's got his bishops working, his bishop pair working. Not only that, still look at the rooks. The king steps out of the way of this tactical construction. I don't want to call it a cheapo because it's also positionally liberating black's pieces and now denting white's pawn structure. E takes, C takes. You see that this d4 square is quite weak. It hasn't got pawns to cover d4. Black now kicks the knight. Knight e4. Maybe white should have considered here taking off a pair of rooks before black's rooks combine. So knight e4, and now the black's rooks combine, and all of a sudden black's position seems to be very energized, and they seem to be working as a team, the pieces, the two rooks and the two bishops that I mentioned, the bishop pair, and the doubling of rooks. This is important. You might not think, well, why is it so important here? E1 is controlled. Well, it's still looking much better than before. White now played bishop c3, and we have bishop f8 looking at the queen and also d3 behind it. White responds with queen b3, setting a little trap. It's not just looking at b7. Can you see the little trap? Black played b6 here. If queen takes d3, what would white play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay, bishop takes g7, winning the queen. Yes, naughty little traps in this game. So black protects his pawn, and white plays rook e3, although it's not strictly needed at the moment. Bishop c5, and the rook finds itself going to f3 now. This is the point, to go to f3, which seems a little bit on the uncomfortable side. This f file, or is it? Is it a tactical target? The rook on f3. We see bishop d4, trying to extinguish the pressure of this bishop. And black's dark square control seems quite nice. Rook e1, c5. I think Caruana starts to go badly wrong in this position. But from the perspective of the doubled rooks, this is an easier to play position for black. They're beautifully coordinating here, and the stability of the e file seems to have been reduced in recent moves. White seems to have been neglecting the e1 square, which rings bells for my own over the board game chess recently. It seems that black has superior rooks, not just doubled, but actually becoming more effective every single move here. We see rook f4. The white rooks seem awkward now. This rook on f4 seems a bit what I describe as artificially placed. It seems as though black's coordination is lacking compared to black's pieces here. And now bishop takes c3, queen takes, queen d5 is played, and look at all of black's pieces coordinating to pressurize e4. And here Caruana is in a very, very difficult position, very awkward looking position. He really stumbles quite badly now with this next move. On move 36, queen b3. I think it's already started to go wrong and get a worse position, but this is very, very bad now. Can you see what black does in this position to celebrate the coordination of all these pieces on e4? Black to play. What would you play here if I give you 5 seconds starting from now? Okay, c4. Yes, undermining the e4 knight. So white, if takes here, then actually these doubled rooks are really quite vicious here. Queen d4, for instance, where is this knight going? And that's pinning the f2 pawn. That would be looking pretty bad. So yes, this is looking very, very unpleasant, this position here. And if queen takes, we just take the queen and take on e4. So queen c3, and white's position is crumbling a bit. C takes d3. White has to defend this knight. f3. He's losing now a pawn from being a pawn up temporarily. He's now a pawn down after bishop takes. Black's taking on e4, taking everything off on e4. A pawn up all of a sudden. That dynamic spell for black has resulted in him going from a pawn down to a pawn up, which is often the case in dynamic aggressive chess. The pressure just creates a material gain. And this is a strong, dangerous passed pawn here. Rook f2, rook e3, looking at white's king side now. Look how shattered it seems to be. King h2, Queen e4. Rook e2 looks really dangerous now. It looks to be all over. Check. King h7. Rook f4. This seems extremely bad for white. Check. It's lost now. Check. And now a very crushing move to secure a mating net. This really does ring bells with one of my own recent over the board games, I've got to say. Can you see what black plays here to secure a mating net? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. H5 check. Yes, I'll give you the link somewhere in the description of the video, perhaps, to my over the board game. It's a similar pattern. The rooks really combined well, and then black was in a position to win material and weave a very dangerous attack here. King takes, queen takes g3, threatening g6 and queen g6. And it's very difficult to defend against these two. If queen f5 check g6, for example. So Caruana resigned here. He'd completely lost control of the position. Completely. And then his king was just hunted. It shows that sometimes, you know, dynamic aggressive play, that it's so difficult, chess. You know, sometimes there's a subtle pawn sacrifice, and all of a sudden, you know, the pieces are all liberated, and rooks are doubling, and bishops are great opposite colour bishops, and there's enormous pressure on a central square. And once the centre collapses, that's often a prelude to a winning attack. Once the centre collapses. So it seems, yeah, Caruana completely lost control of the position in this game. But you know, great credit to Dmitry Jakovenko for playing so energetically. You have to. If you're in a worse position with double pawns, but with a bishop pair, he found a concrete way of liberating his position with that ingenious pawn sack. I guess you could argue maybe Caruana was playing a bit risky with his queen h5 and moving his king a little bit more to the center, you know, where, you know, things can go wrong. Things can go wrong, like subtle tactical ideas can emerge more easily. The king's got to be tucked away as much as possible in chess, it seems. Otherwise, there's these amazing sacrifices to reveal such, you know, dynamic potential. But anyway, that's the nature of the game. Very complicated. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.